Greetings and welcome to another edition of AUHSD Future Talks. I'm your host, Michael Matsuda, the Superintendent of the Anaheim Union High School District. And as our 7,000 plus podcast listeners know, this show is dedicated to the future of education for all of our young people, not just in AUHSD, but across the United States. So, and we've been very lucky to have amazing speakers, beginning with our wonderful teachers and students, but also with college presidents and CEOs. And today we have a definite heavyweight in education, Michael Fullan. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's such, now that we're working together, I can't get enough of you. So I'm glad to have this opportunity.
I've been looking forward to this one for sure, this future talk. Just for our audience who don't know who this amazing man is, and I can't imagine that, but Michael Fullan is the Global Leadership Director for New Pedagogies for Deep Learning. And what that is a worldwide network involving several nations focusing on educational reform. And really, it's all about helping to achieve the moral purpose of all children learning. Michael is the author of 45 books and counting, and including books that have inspired all of us, like The Principle, Spirit Week, and Coherence. So his work has really influenced us, AUHSD, and leaders across the world. So I want to get right into it, Michael. In fact, you hot off the press is an Ed Week article that came out titled, "We Can't Escape the Status Quo in Education." And in it, you talk about a big part of making this successful is to figure out how to make individual and group interests and actions fuse, or at least work together. System change is a collective matter, but here is my worry, my mystery, if you like. Even when change is badly needed, hidden forces pull us back to pockets of the status quo or worse. The content of the strategy. Michael, what do you mean by the content of the strategy?
Well, the strategy, what I mean is the policies and the actions that are intended to change the system. And almost, I'm sure everyone agrees for the last 50 years that the current educational system needs transformation. So that's not even a debate that whether it's needed. So what I'm talking about is what content of strategy and conditions and action will actually bring about that change. We have to define what that change is. That's a key thing.
So you, in this article, and I think in many others, obviously you point out that many people are concerned about mental health and well-being. But I think that one of the things that you talk about is that this new strategy has them fused well-being and learning. And I think you're definitely, you go and talk about deep learning, the ability to learn how to learn, to know oneself, and care about the other in the environment. How is well-being and learning fused in your mind?
I want to, Mike, back into that, or step back and get back into it, because I think it requires a little bit of context. I worked with the Premier of Ontario for a decade at the beginning of the century, improving literacy, numeracy, high school graduation in Ontario province. And we have 5,000 schools. We had 2 million students, and the literacy and numeracy was not doing well. High school graduation was at 64%. This is 2003. So we did for 10 years, worked at that from the government level to the three levels, the districts, 72 districts, and the schools. And we're successful. That is, all three of those indicators went up in a strong way. So in 2010, I was overconfident. I said, or 2013, I said, we've really done it on a fairly large scale. And in fact, in California, the Stewart Foundation started to send up groups of leaders from California, from the teachers union, from the department, from the superintendency, all kinds. We had about 30 or 40 at a time for 2 years saying, what's the secret in Ontario? So I won't belabor that except to say I was wrong, and I was wrong for two reasons. One was it turned out that literacy and numeracy in high school graduation per se are not the goals you want to highlight and be obsessed with. That's not good enough for reasons we can talk about. And the second is the society's become more complex since 2013. And so much more complex that no strategy from the top that's readily going to make a difference. I can tell you what my conclusions are before we finish about what kind of strategy is necessary. But what I thought was pretty clear in 2013 when we finished that work just turned out to be the society pulled the rug out from under us.
Yes, and in this short but very provocative article, you talk about this well-being and learning together. And I think this is what you're hinting at is that the science also supports the notion that education must recognize the role of emotion. I feel, therefore I learn. And that leads to this deeper learning that many of our districts are trying to integrate, because so many districts are focused on well-being and mental health, and they're being reactive to it.
Mm-hmm.
Building, and certainly you need social workers and you need layers of support on the back end, but what about the front end in terms of what's happening with instruction? Could you elaborate a little bit on this concept of the 6 C's and their connection through the pedagogy, through emotional well-being?
Okay, so let's just build a few things in here. One is that when I write about the drivers, and we can talk about those, I said one of the wrong drivers is academic obsession, and I mean obsession. The obsession on grades, on testing, and getting to the best university, absolute obsession. And it turns out that that's probably not the prime priority for the majority of students and their parents, actually. So we've got that as a kind of backdrop. And then when we get into now the stresses of not only that extreme emphasis on education, academic education at all costs, you have then the complexity of society with COVID. It's just overwhelmingly too much. So I think what's happening is then it became, thanks to COVID, perversely in a sense, well-being came to the fore. And that when you look at it closely and you trace it back even 10 years, you find that well-being was hardly spoken about by the majority of people 10 years ago. And it was taken as either a given. And then when people did worry about it, it was usually about ill-being. Some students aren't doing well, that's too bad, we better do something about that. But now, thanks to the neuroscience, thanks to common sense experience of living these days, everybody realizes that well-being is the point, not just curing ill-being, but really well-being in a complex society. You can't survive if you don't have that sense of belonging, that sense of who you are, that sense of being able to be part of a group to make a difference. All of that, you cannot survive without that. So this has really given us a centerpiece, and I think in some ways, this is really where the kind of specificity comes into play these days, is that well-being comes roaring on the scene. And ironically, I'm going to say it this way, it could overwhelm learning because people are so occupied with well-being. That's what they think of. That's the end all and the be all. Well, academic learning was never the end all and the be all, and well-being in some kind of abstract nirvana is not the end all and be all, because learning how to be skilled in these complex societies. Now we come to your question about the 6 C's. I mean, we have 6 C's, you have 5, they're virtually identical. We have the 6 C's are the global competencies that individuals and groups and society need to cope and be very successful and be innovative for the future in 2023. That's what they need. That's the primary goal, is healthy, well-being people who are working away at complex problems with using the 6 C's as the leverage to get at it, and then mobilizing the interest and the skills of students, teachers, community, district, and the policy set itself.
And I think I know you would agree that teachers who are at the top of their game, they know this, that there is a connection between well-being and instructional pedagogy in the classroom. And it's about the stance of inquiry and problem solving, applied learning, which leads to more engagement, which leads to, yes, better numeracy and literacy, because you start like figuring out, hey, this is how I apply my content to problem solving. And so many of us have it the other way around. We push that piece first before this other piece. Could you comment on the notion of learning loss and how, at least in the United States, we are in the process of spending billions of dollars on learning loss around numeracy and literacy? And I have my own opinions about that, because I think that we are in the process of stigmatizing this generation.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got it wrong, and you know that as well. That I would say that learning loss, almost by definition, is a deficit model. It says, okay, there's a loss, we better fill it up.
Right.
And it sounds strange to say it this way, but academic learning for most students was never an intrinsic driver. It was never something, I can't wait to do well in algebra. Some people did that, but not so many.
Yeah.
So it was never the big driver, but it's essential as part of the learning. So what you have to do is get the driver going. And the driver is my sense of well-being, my sense of concern that society is collapsing. It's collapsing climatologically, for sure. It's collapsing socially. Social trust is down, conflict, everything is awry. So when that goes wrong, those are not academics. Academics are part of the solution, but they're not the underlying primary thing. And most students now, the good news is they want to make a difference. They want to be teamed up and linked in. And what you've done in Anaheim is really do that on a large scale, which I'd like to talk to in a few minutes. But what you have is you've tapped into the intrinsic interest. And now they're going for the problems, and they need academics knowledge to be good at critical thinking, all the things that we should have had in the foundation. They're part and parcel of the implementation now. So there's a whole new reformation, and it's not normal for the organizational structure of most school districts. You have changed your organizational structure. You've changed the substance of what you've done. You've changed how you do it. Almost everybody at the levels, whether students or teachers or parents, they can articulate what you're about as well as you can now, because you've spent 10 years developing that.
Well, thank you for that. And I think this goes back to the content of the strategy, right? The drivers.
Yeah.
Because the drivers for too long, both of us would agree, have been focused on sort of the wrong things. And, people that I'm sure you've had pushback. I certainly have pushback on these teaching the 5 C's or the 6 C's. Some people say, well, that's kind of fluff, and that's you're dumbing down the curriculum. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you look at those 5 or 6 C's, they're not exactly fluff anyways on any level. If you start to define collaboration or critical thinking or creativity, how could that be fluff? So it's not really fluff. It's just kind of ways of people feeling uncomfortable. Well, that doesn't seem to be the centrality that I grew up with. So I think I think that all you have to do is look at what the students and teachers are producing. In your case, because we've seen it up close, and you're doing this great job of disseminating it through this series that you have, is that when you see it happening, and when students are explaining it to parents or strangers, it does bowl you over, because it's the substance of things. So I want to hold them accountable to the quality of the products. And you're doing it with your capstone projects, what it is they produce and they stand for. So we're doing a better job now, you are, of capturing the outcomes than any test can do. You know that. And when you capture the outcomes, we're not talking about fluff.
We're very excited about that. And I think that this 6C language is actually the language that our business partners want.
Yeah.
They see a big sort of gap between, I would say, even K-16 in the world of work, because we're talking about emotional intelligence, customer service, that self-awareness. We have 90 corporate partners now, probably the most in California. And I've had an opportunity to talk to several CEOs who appreciate that we're making this shift. How, again, you're at that 30,000 foot level, because the country now is grappling with this concept of quiet quitting, where, in fact, Gallup organization has come out with a poll that shows 50% of American workers are quiet quitters, meaning that they're putting in the minimum time. And a very large percent of that is the Generation Z and millennials. So there's a disconnect, I think, between a student's purpose in calling, because it's not fully actualized in K-12 or K-16 systems, and the world of work, whether it's business or nonprofit. I think this is another way to frame what we're trying to do, Michael, to wake up the business community and the education community, because when you have a generation of, quote, quiet quitters, that is going to be a huge threat to the economy and to this experiment called democracy in the United States. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, first I want to go back. I'm a little bit uncomfortable when you tell me I'm at the 30,000 level, because you're at
both levels.
We pride ourselves. In fact, I often say, you've heard me say it, I'm sure, that I say 85% of what we're learning is because of the specifics. We're learning from the field. That's what I connected to you when I first saw you. So this is really this is grounded. It just happens to be trying to cover more of the system, but it's definitely grounded. And I think this the quiet quitters or anything else like that, it's a sign of decay, obviously, the decay of the society, and yet when you approach it differently the way you have, I would say that the students born, let's just say since 2000. All of those students born since 2000 have grown up digitally, 100% of them. And they have a different attitude. They want to make a difference. They know the world is troubled. They're going to live, until the next century, a lot of them. So they're chomping at the bit, but we haven't given them the outlet to be players. So you have to have students as change makers. They have to have the 5 or 6 C's as their ammunition. They have to be doing things that cause problems to be solved. There has to be individual development, collaborative or small group development, and societal development. All of those are there. And the students come alive. Not only do they come alive, they lead it. So the current students born since 2000, put them in an environment like Anaheim's high school district. They're not quiet quitters. There's a dynamic word that's the opposite of that will capture what they're doing. They want to do way more than their individual well-being and learning. They want the society to change. They want the state to change. They know that change is needed, and they're raring to have an outlet, the combination of going it. So if we unleash that, if you just imagine the social and economic resources that group represents, that we have underutilized by tenfold because of the nature of the schools we've had, they will solve those problems with us pretty quickly, because once the momentum is there, it's like contagion. It's powerful.
So, in the short term, the country is investing, California in particular, and unfortunately they do call it learning loss, literally billions of dollars. What is your advice to districts and superintendents and how to approach those short-term dollars?
I want to put it this way, that you also know that California has invested heavily in the concept of community schools. Yes. Right. So they said there's an ecosystem. The concept is there's an ecosystem here. You don't have schools here in society over there. You've got the community, and the schools are all one thing. And this is why you're seeing the business connection, because you're defining learning that the business community is part of the ecosystem. that parents and other parts of that. So I think the orientation is right. That is, the good news is now that when you elevate community schools to that level, it's not just the community schools in terms of local mental health and poverty and shelter. It is that, but it's also the business community. And there's really lots of resources there. So I think we have the legitimacy from the policy to act on that. You didn't need permission for any of the things you did, and you didn't ask for permission. A lot of the things you did in the last 10 years. So we've got that now, and then I think we'll just have to, I guess I'll say, tolerate the learning loss language a little bit, because that is a first priority for a lot of people. You immediately think of what look what we've lost. We've lost a full year of that. Look at all those things. So I think that's understandable. There's no reason why we can't cope with the learning loss language for the next 2 years while we build the more fundamental solution. You can do both at once. And we have to be reticent about the learning language loss, but there's nothing so bad about trying to boost up literacy and numeracy. That's fine. But we better do these other things. And, strangely enough, literacy and numeracy takes off when you do the other things well.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you have created a network of like-minded leaders in education on the ground, and people that are trying to move forward despite a lot of the outside constraints of the testing and all these other accountability things. And like you say, it's not necessarily an either or. You can go forward with the 6 C's and deeper learning, and you're going to get better attendance, better graduation rates, all of the things that the academic metrics measure. And I do believe that we are, as you do, at an inflection point. And you have the luxury, well, not the luxury, you've put in so much hard work creating this network on the ground and at that high level. My next question is, do you think that there is a needle, as MLK would say, moving in the right direction? You've done this, you've spent your whole life on this. And are we getting closer to a convergence and really catching that wave of reform?
I think we're getting closer, but we haven't seen that needle move much in the last, let's just take 2022. It hasn't, because people have been reeling. They've gone for the learning loss. That's the prominent thing on their mind. So on that one hand, you can say that it hasn't been developing, but we have been. One of the things I would say is that a good byproduct of of COVID is that students and parents, for example, and teachers actually see a bigger world now than they did 24 months ago.
Yes.
They actually see the system in a way they've never seen it before. And so in our formulations about how to get the 3 levels going, there's more than 3, but let's say local, community, district, region, and state. I've reversed what I used to say. It's the same attempt to get the system to go, but think of these words. I say we have to build the base, which are students and parents and community. That's one. We have to mobilize the middle to help do that. That's you. And we have to, and this is a new phrase I have, it's a bit playful in some ways, we have to intrigue the top. Just think of that, intrigue the top. And so I think the top are the state leaders in this case. They're not all that comfortable with what they've been doing the last 20 years. It's not working, lots of grief, all of that. They can't be enjoying themselves. So the top, I think, has a we have potential with the top, but we can't get the top to lead it, but we might get them to be enthusiastic about it as it unfolds. And this is why I would say, you're enjoying yourself, I have to say, Mike. You are enjoying yourself, even these last 10 years, even these last 3 years, because you don't have to get permission from policymakers to do what you're doing, and they like it when they see it, I'm sure. So yes. We want many more of this kind of action where people don't wait for the top to get it right. That'll be doomsday. Start getting it right at the bottom and the middle. Start teaming up with some of the top that wants to do that. don't worry about the top getting in the way, because 90% of the time they don't get in the way. You can figure out ways where they're not kind of a drag on you. So yeah, it's not very satisfying with it was smoother, but tolerate this learning loss thing. Don't panic about it. Make sure you do the more fundamental things, and they will accelerate. I'm not interviewing you, but if I were, I would say, have you noticed a momentum shift in the last 24 months compared to the previous 3 years prior to that? Nothing to do with the pandemic. Just pick those 5 years. Have you seen greater ownership on the part of students, teachers,
Yes.
community leaders, etc.? You have. Go ahead.
Yes, it's really, I'm can pinch myself because yes, although people are tired coming out of this pandemic, our people, there's a critical mass of teachers that are in the flow of teaching and learning.
Yeah.
I am so proud and impressed with the work that they're doing. And it's hard work, but they're loving it. It goes back to being when you work on a lesson that has applied problem solving, the kids are just, really focused on that, and you get very excited. You get a kid that finds their calling or finds their purpose, and it's just on fire about learning. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier. The science is showing the connection between emotion and and pedagogy, right? And that's going to lead to more engagement, which I wish more of our colleagues understood that, because the teachers are ready to go. There's enough teachers out there. If we unleash the teachers, we can help change the trajectory of this country. There's a colleague of yours, is Raj Chetty from Harvard, who talks about creating the ecosystems of innovation in regions, right? Because and we can quadruple the number of patents in the United States. We need to really unyoke the spirit of innovation in the United States, and that begins with unyoking the teachers.
Yeah, I think I know a bit about Chetty's work, and I think what he's done is carve out when you put these things together, you get the results, and they've got empirical examples of doing that. So I think there's a real chance at this time to mobilize people, because when you solve the teacher shortage problem all of a sudden, it seems. Because
you make it more an inviting profession, as it should be. And I in the closing minutes here, I know that you're working internationally, and you're having a convening that's coming up. Would you like to talk a little bit about that convening?
Yeah, we have our deep learning framework, and you're implementing, and you're now a member with us, and we're in probably 18 countries with a lot of groups like yours all over the place. It's not a critical mass because the world is big, and 18 countries with 3,000 schools is a monster, but it's big enough. And we have every 18 months or so our deep learning lab, where we come together for 3 days, and at the meeting are our members and outsiders, so to speak, people who aren't members, but they come probably half and half. So we happen to be holding it in Anaheim, April 17th to 19th. And this is where we are going to feature almost 80% of the presentations will be coming from the field. You'll be presenting, I'm sure. And and those are examples coming from the field where we have that chance to consolidate, build up ourselves, our knowledge of the community, but also attract newcomers to it. I don't think that by itself will save the world, but I'm saying that there's lots and lots of people now that want to be mobilized, I guess put it that way, really want to do this work. And as fast as something can go wrong, it can go right when it starts to connect, because social contagion is fast. It's fast on the bad thing, it's fast on the good things. And so we need to build this social contagion. We're working quite a lot, as you know, I think in San Diego County, 42 districts, 500,000 students, huge. And the district county level, the superintendents, communities, they want to do something, they're moving. So I put a lot of, I think California is probably the most potential, highest excitement of educators and others who want to do this. I can't think of any others around the world that are really that on the focus. Even the big kind of performers like South Korea and others that have historically been ahead of the game, they have suffered from academic obsession because there's so much stress in the system to keep performing academically, and they're looking for alternatives as well. So I think we can help lead the world if we can combine this. And just one last thing, Mike, if we take these key concepts, equity, equality, well-being, and learning, and you get those four things pushing into, I call it collide and collude. It's a really odd way of putting it. If you get them colliding, and they collude in the best sense of the positive sense of that word, to do good things, you can get lots of impact from that. Problem with equity, it's been siloed. The
Yes.
reality is, if you solve equity, you solve almost every other problem.
Right.
You solve it's not just helping those that were disadvantaged. The whole system gets better. So this is we've siloed equity. We have made well-being learning disconnected to well-being. You start to redo those in a way that come together. I think that we will see the pedagogy and the focus on equity and the social well-being and the good of all wrapped up into the same solution.
You know what, Michael, I'm always love time with you because you're such of a amazing, critical thinking partner that you're a mirror. You know, you're able to bring all the stuff together, this divergent, into some coherence and convergence. So really thank you on behalf of so many educators and especially our young people. And by the way, what would be the one snippet of wisdom for our young people who listen to this?
I would say go for it. That's all I can say. It's not the end runs of the education system anymore, like Greta Thunberg had to do. It's not that anymore. It's going for it internal to the system and change the system that you are in.
I love it. I love it. Okay, Michael Fullan, thank you so much on behalf of all of us for the work that you do.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really glad we're at the beginning of our relationship. Next 2 years, 3 years are going to be fantastically interesting, and I hope we'll get some breakthroughs. Thank you, Mike, very much.